Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT08, and BT08 offers us lots of new and powerful cards to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be the Cherubimon Hybrids deck. So Purple Cherubimon Hybrids is still going to do the classic Purple Cherubimon Hybrids thing that it was doing in the last format. It just has a couple of new tools that I could think about incorporating into the deck to really spice it up and make it even stronger than it did before, or change things up to handle various different situations. But either way, the deck is still trying to set up its Tamers, to set up its Hybrids, to be able to make Cherubimon even more powerful to control the opponent's field, and utilize Cherubimon to delete him, to be able to get some really powerful rookies with really decent abilities off, to be able to aggress onto the opponent. So, without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Upamon. If you wanted to run a 5th Digitama, you could. It doesn't necessarily matter what that 5th Digitama is doing, as long as you feel like it's going to be benefiting the deck in some way, shape, or form. But Upamon is just generically the best Digitama that we have to act as a really solid card draw engine for our yellow rookies, because we're a purple hybrids and we don't necessarily need to run a purple low end. Granted, you could run a purple low end if you wanted to, but I feel like Yellow-Purple has some really decent support in BT08 that we could think about taking advantage of, and that just makes playing a yellow low end even better than before. So when you attack with this card as an inheritable, once per turn, if you have 3 or fewer cards in your security, then we get to draw 1 card, and it's easier to maintain a lower security count because the opponent's eventually going to be hitting us, and then we have lots of good abilities to recover while we're at 3 or below security, to make Upamon as effective as we can possibly make him. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Bokomon. So Bokomon is still one of the best search engines that we have to try to help fish out our Tamers and our Hybrids, which is the majority of what this deck is about. So his on-play ability states that we get to reveal the top 5 cards of our deck, add 1 card with Hybrid or 10 Warriors and its traits into our hand, and 1 Tamer, doesn't even matter what color, from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in any order. So he could help us fish out the parts and pieces that we need to be able to play our deck as efficiently as we can. And speaking of efficiency, he even has a nice secondary ability to make Digivolving on top of our Tamers even easier, where during your turn, once per turn, when one of your Tamers Digivolves, then we get to gain 2 memory, so that way we could easily climb the stages with and be able to utilize our cards as effectively as we can. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Salomon. So this is the BT02 version of Salomon, and this Salomon is in the deck to act as our recovery engine. So it has the nice on-delete ability, where if we have 3 or fewer cards in our security, then we get to draw 1 card. So we have multiple different ways to be able to delete this. The easiest way is trying to swing into the opponent's security and have it be deleted by the opponent's security Digimon. Sometimes that's not always the case, so we do have alternative ways to be able to delete this card to be able to consistently be able to trigger the recovery ability, which combos relatively nicely with Upamon, so that way we could keep a Upamon with a Salomon in raising, move it out when we feel comfortable or we need to be able to recover, and then swing, draw a card off of Upamon, get Salomon deleted, and recover that way. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of BushiAgumon. So BushiAgumon is going to be the main aggro tool that we want to use in combination with Cherubimon, because it natively has the rush ability. So if for some reason the opponent just gives us lots of memory, then we could just hard slam BushiAgumon and swing right away, but it's supposed to be played off of Cherubimon's ability, so that way we could, swing with it right away as one big powerful combo turn. Next, on to the level 4s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Loweemon. So Loweemon is acting very similar to Lobomon all the way back from BT04, where it's just a very basic Digimon that has the ability to be able to Digivolve on top of our purple Tamers as if they were purple level 3 Digimon. So this is the reason why we don't necessarily need to run a purple level 3 Digimon, is because we are using our Tamers to fulfill that role, allowing us to be able to use off-color rookies, because we don't necessarily care about Digivolving on top of our rookies into Loweemon. And that kind of only plays into hybrid strengths to be able to splash multiple colors, because I'm also going to be running 4 copies of KaiserLeomon as a very similar card to act as Loweemon, except this actually has some upside and different ways that we could use this card. So even though we're not digivolving him 3 on top of a purple level 3, we could think about utilizing purple level 3s, but we don't necessarily need to. We're going to be mostly digivolving him for 1 on top of a level 4, so that way he could digivolve on top of either himself or a Loweemon to be able to trigger his when digivolving ability a little bit more consistently. So what his when digivolving ability is that we're trying to take advantage of is if this Digimon has hybrid in its traits or it has a Koichi in its Digivolution source, then this Digimon gains the retaliation ability until the end of the opponent's next turn, so that way we could use this card to try to control the opponent's field and beat up some of their suspended Digimon and punish them for some of their plays. Next, on to the level 5s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Rahihiman. So Rahihiman is realistically the only level 5 that we need, because there's not really another level 5 that does what he does. So what he does for the deck is if we're using him on top of any of our level 4s, which in order to get our level 4s out, then we would probably need to digivolve on top of a Tamer, which means that he could digivolve for 1 instead of 3, making him just a very tempo efficient card to be able to climb our stages with. And we want to climb our stages into either Rhihimon or Cherubimon for their on-delete abilities, and his on-delete ability is really good for the deck, stating that if this card with hybrid in its traits is in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then we get to play 1 purple Tamer card from our trash for free. So essentially when he gets deleted, he's going to be able to revive a Tamer, so that way we could utilize that Tamer's on-play or passive abilities again and again. So the main Tamer we were going to want to be playing him with is either Koichi or Matt, so that way we have even easier access to not only cards in our deck and try to fill up our trash, but to be able to utilize our trash and add cards back from our trash into our hand to reuse later, which is a huge strength to Cherubimon, is the fact that he actually has access to almost every single card that we're going to be putting into our trash. And speaking of Cherubimon, next onto the level 6s, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Cherubimon. So Cherubimon is going to be the main stopping point for the deck and what we want to try to end in combo off of, just because his when digivolving ability is really powerful at controlling the opponent's field, where when we digivolve up into him, we get to play 1 purple Tamer card from our trash for free, and then for each Tamer we have in play, we get to delete 1 of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So this already could be a huge tempo swing, not only being able to set yourself up with a Tamer to delete the opponent's Digimon, but you could possibly delete multiple of the opponent's Digimon if they're just sitting and chilling on the field. Then he has a nice on-delete ability for when we aggress or combo with him with some of our other cards, where on delete for each Tamer we have in play, then we get to play 1 level 3 Digimon from our trash for free. The cool thing about Cherubimon is it's not even specifying what kind of color it needs to be, so we could revive our BushiAgumon to use for his rush ability to try to end the game the turn we go into Cherubimon. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 1 copy of Cherubimon. So this is the brand new Cherubimon to come out with BT08, and this is a pretty good card just because, well, it's another way to delete our Cherubimon to trigger some of its various abilities, but at worst we could still digivolve into this card on top of purple level 5s. So what we want to do with this card mainly is delete our Cherubimon, because he has an ability where when we play this card from our hand, we could delete 1 of our purple Cherubimons to reduce his play cost by 8. So essentially, we could hard play him for 3, delete our Cherubimon, get our Cherubimon's on delete ability off to be able to spawn a wide field, and still have a body left over. And he has a nice on play / when digivolving ability to take advantage of, where for each Tamer we have in play, we get to activate the following effect of 1 of the opponent's Digimon gets -2 to their security tech until the end of the turn. So if we were unable to delete the Digimon, we could at least try to stall them out so that way they can't really effectively use their Digimon for that turn. Next, on to the options, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Calling from the Darkness. So Calling from the Darkness is a really cheap and efficient option for us to use, only costing 1, with the powerful main ability where we get to delete one of our Digimon, then we get to return up to 2 purple Digimon from our trash into our hand. So this helps us grab back our hybrids and our purple Cherubimon to reuse them again and again. And then on top of that, the crazy thing about this card is it's also helping us delete some of our Digimon to trigger some of our on-delete abilities, but even at worst, if we don't have a Digimon on our field to delete, we could still utilize this card to grab cards back from our trash, so that way it's almost never a dead card. And then on top of all of that, it has the nice security ability where we get to add this card to our hand to use when we feel like is needed. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Schwartz Lizards. So Schwartz Lizards is going to act very similarly to Cherubimon, where it's just going to be another mass board clear card. So it's going to act as a very powerful security threat where its security activates its main, and its main effect is we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon in play that's level 5 or lower for each tamer or hybrid we have in play, which is the whole theme of what the deck is trying to do. But unfortunately, between Cherubimon and Schwartz Lizards, we don't necessarily have good ways at deleting high-level Digimon, but in BT08, we actually did get a card to help us try to mitigate that weakness in the form of a Pandemonium Flame. So Pandemonium Flame is a 2-costed purple option with the main ability where we get to delete one of our Digimon to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon that's level is equal to or less than the Digimon we deleted. So we could use our Cherubimon to be able to delete level 6s that are unsuspended on the opponent's field, but at worst it's just another card to help us try to delete our Digimon to control the opponent's field. Then its security ability allows us to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon outright without the need of a sacrifice, so it's just a good card to use all around. And speaking of our options that are trying to delete our own Digimon for various benefits, I'm also going to be running 1 copy of Deathclaw, just because Deathclaw allows us to delete one of our Digimon to delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon. So it's just another card that's trying to help delete our Digimon while control the opponent's field, which is kind of the whole sub-theme of the deck, is just trying to punish the opponent for having Digimon in play. Then it also has a nice security ability where it just gets to delete a level 4 or lower outright, so it's just another really good card to try to help control the opponent's field with. And then the last option of the deck is going to be 2 copies of Blinding Ray. So Blinding Ray is still just an absolutely fantastic card because we could put ourselves into particular security thresholds that we need to be in order to trigger Upamon and Salomon, and it's a good card to help us gain some instant memory to make more powerful plays happen. So its main ability states that we get to trash the top card of our security stack, then we get to gain 2 memory. The cool thing is that if we have 0 cards in our security, then this is just an absolutely free card to use to be able to gain some instant memory to make those power plays possible. And then lastly, onto the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Matt Ishida. So this is the BT02 version of Matt, and this is going to be our deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer. So if our memory is ever less than 3, he'll just always hard set us to 3, which is really good to make our plays as efficient and consistent as we possibly can. Then on top of that, he has a nice on-play ability, which really synergizes in combos with the deck, where we get to add 1 purple Digimon or purple option from our trash back into our hand, to be able to reuse lots of our purple Digimon and options. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Kari Kamiya. So this is the BT04 version of Kari Kamiya, and this is a really good card to interact with the fact that we're going to be playing around with our security a little bit and act as more of a de-incentivization tool from the opponent wanting to attack into us because they'll potentially lose memory. So her all turns ability states that when a card is removed from our security stack, whether we're doing it or the opponent's doing it, doesn't really matter, then we get to suspend this tamer to be able to gain a memory. So this combos really nicely with Blinding Ray to be able to gain us more memory, or, like I stated before, de-incentivize the opponent from attacking our security, because for each card we have in play, we'll potentially take away some of their memory, and that could possibly end their turn. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Koichi. So Koichi is going to be the main fodder that we want to digivolve on top of for our hybrids because he actually has an inheritable ability. So his inheritable ability states that it's an on-delete ability, we get to gain 1 memory, and if our hybrids are trying to basically delete themselves, or we have the ability to delete themselves to gain some various benefits, then we could use this to make more powerful plays possible, or make our plays a little bit more efficient. But this is a really good card to combo with Rahihiman, similar to Matt, because he has a nice on-play ability that both of those those cards can play off of, where it's an on-play ability of allowing us to draw a card and discard one card, not only helping us fish through our deck, but set up our trash at the same time. Rhihimon with Mat just allows us to use our extra mats to be able to use his on-play ability to add extra cards back into our hand, similar to Cherubimon on how he could utilize both of these on-play abilities as well. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Analog Youth. So Analog Youth is an absolutely insane tamer for this deck to be using, just because his on-play ability is already doing something purple kind of wants, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 Digimon from among them into our hand, and then the rest go into the trash. So the fact that we're filling up our trash to use cards for later turns is really, really good, while adding extra cards into our hand, replacing himself. Then on top of that, he has a secondary ability. That's what's making this card extra insane, where during all turns, when one of our level 5 or higher Digimon with Digivolution sources is deleted, so namely our Cherubimon or our Rahihiman, then we get to suspend this tamer, and if we do, we get to gain 1 memory and hatch a Digi-Egg into our empty space in our raising area. So this helps us reload our raising area, gain some additional memory, and it triggers off of our higher level Digimon being deleted, which is what they want to do anyway, especially since we already have multiple different ways to be able to delete some of our higher level Digimon. And then there's still just a whole bunch of room for customization and flexibility, all depending on what you want to gain out of the deck and the types of cards you want to use and incorporate. So if you wanted to, you could think about utilizing some purple cards and a purple low end, and with that you could include some floodgates in the form of Gazimon to stop the opponent's memory manipulating shenanigans, and we even have Psychemon as another floodgate, so that way the players can't reduce their play costs. This does affect us a little bit with our yellow Cherubimon because it is trying to reduce its own play cost, so you do have to be aware of that. But again, that's just a flexibility on how you could possibly build the deck, where you might not even need that new Cherubimon if you're going to be running a purple low end. But if you're continuing to want to try to run a yellow low end, then we do have Loweemon, and we could even think about extending Loweemon to the Loweemon package, where we could run both Loweemon and Chaos Mode if we so feel like it, to help us control the opponent's field and recover our deck, depending on how much of the package you want to incorporate. Then if we are continuing on the trend of running a yellow low end, then we do have a yellow floodgate in the form of Cutemon to stop the opponent from reducing their Digivolution costs, and we have a slew of really powerful yellow Digimon that we also have access to, not only with some yellow-purple synergy, but just good yellow cards as a whole with very powerful on-play abilities for our Cherubimon to try to take advantage of, like Pulsemon with the classic on-play ability of potentially drawing us a card or gaining us a memory, or both. Then we do have some other level 4s that we could think about running to kind of act as a buffer for Digivolving, and we do have the ability of having some cards to Digivolve off of purple and yellow. So I think Black Gatomon is one of the best cards that we have to do that. Even though it's a little bit expensive, that extra cost comes with higher levels of consistency on being able to utilize the card. Then we do have some other really solid level 5s that you could tech into the deck. So you could tech in Rebellion for some extra defense because he could help fill up the trash and gain the blocker and retaliation abilities. And then we also have Skull Greymon as a really good card to want to discard for discard fodder, just because he could put himself underneath a purple Digimon and give them the retaliation ability. But at worst, if we want to Digivolve up into him and aggress with this card, then he'll be able to make himself a really powerful level 5 Digimon that could swing for potentially 10k. And speaking of really powerful Digimon, we could even think about splashing in Anubismon, just because what he could res is also not color restricted, and whatever we're going to be resing will also be able to have the rush ability attached to it. But we do have some other really good discard fodder cards that we could run in combination with the deck. So Nidhoggmon not only is a really good alternative level 6 to try to help control the opponent's field, but is a really good card we want to discard for some instant memory gain off of literally any of our discarding based abilities. Then if we are trying to play a little bit deeper into that purple-yellow aspect, we do have some really good purple and yellow cards that we could try to take advantage of in the form of Ophanimon Fall Down Mode, because it's a really good card for when it gets deleted to be able to play purple or yellow level 4 Digimon from our trash for free. So it's still just doing that same type of thing where it's just pulling cards out of our trash to use, BlackAgumon is probably the best target for it because it natively has the Rush ability, but I digress, and it also has a good when digivolving ability in case we want to try to incorporate into that 2-color aspect, where if this card has a purple card in its Digivolution source, then it'll delete one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, acting as some more control, and if this Digimon has a yellow card in its Digivolution source, then we get to recover 1. So with both, then we get both abilities off, making Ophanimon a really powerful 2-color Digimon that we could possibly use. And because we are already trying to play into that 2-color aspect, we also have Flame Hellscythe as an absolutely fantastic card for the deck to not only act as some more removal and control, but to help res some of our Digimon to help push the aggression forward, with a nice security ability of activating its main to be an absolute threat for the opponent. Then if we do want to dip a little bit more into yellow and try to play a little bit more defensively, then we do have some really solid cards to help us recover in yellow, and we also have some really other solid control tools in yellow for us to take advantage of. But speaking of yellow control tools, we also have more yellow-purple control tools in the form of Chaos Degradation, just because it's another really good card to try to help remove the opponent's threats. And then we do have some alternative Tamers that we could think about incorporating into the deck. The best one that I can think about is going to be the BT03 Mimi, just because she's a really cheap and efficient purple Tamer to hard play, and if we're not necessarily utilizing our options, we could Digivolve on top of her into our hybrids, but at least with her passively sitting on the field, she'll help us make our options more efficient and the opponent's options less efficient. But for the most part, this is just my interpretation of a really solid core or shell for Cherubimon in BT08. Unfortunately, I think that the deck's core or shell doesn't really change a whole lot from BT07, so the majority of it is going to be relatively unchanged, and it's just adding in some of these new tech and tools to think about incorporating that's really going to help define the deck. But regardless, I think it's still going to be a fun and powerful deck with a whole bunch of different ways on how you could approach it, depending on the type of tech and tools you need to use, all depending on how the meta is actually shaping up to be. And I still think just playing around with this core or shell is going to make Cherubimon still a really strong deck to play, or at worst, a really fun deck to play. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.